Hello everyone, it's Dr. Jay-Z here. Today is one of the special occasions in which I will not just be showing my chess skills, but in which I will be talking about something that is more academic, that is real world related, and this is AI, right? Artificial intelligence, more specifically, the political philosophy of AI, as written by Mark Zuckerberg, who is a philosophy professor from the University of Vienna. So to start things off, I just want to read from his conclusion chapter. I'm just paraphrasing him. We are now living in the time of AI. Thinking about the future of politics needs to crucially be connected to thinking about technologies and the relations to politics. In this case, AI is here, AI is our time, and hence AI is where we have to jump and think. Based on political philosophy and related relevant theory, this book has provided some guidance for this jumping and thinking. So there's a lot of chapters. There are chapters on freedom, there are chapters on equality and justice, and one on democracy, right? Very long chapter. One on power, concerning surveillance, and a very interesting chapter, number 6, about non-humans, about animals, about machines, environmental politics, and post-humanism. Right, so I will just talk about something that is very relevant to the present, and that is equality and justice, bias and discrimination by AI. This is chapter number 3. In my humble opinion, this is the chapter that is most relevant to engineers and to scientists like myself in general. So I just want to read about this thing that is called the difference principle, right? Just highlighting one very important principle that is relevant for AI. So what is this difference principle? It is a principle that is advocated by John Rawls, the famous American political philosopher, who gave us the book, A Theory of Justice, which I read as an undergrad, right? So based on that book, right, Rawls thought that people would come up with 2 principles, one that gives equal liberties to all, and one that arranges social inequalities in such a way that they are to the greatest benefit of the least advantaged and create equality of opportunity, right? So according to Rawls, inequalities are fine if they maximize the position of the worst off, right? And this is the difference principle. If you maximize opportunities for people of less advantages, with less advantage than you have, than you are actually practicing what we call positive discrimination. And this is the current state of the USA right now. By giving scholarships to people of color, by giving them to people from the LGBT class, we are actually seeing the difference principle, positive discrimination in action. And in my own opinion, this actually is against the principle of meritocracy, right? On the surface, it seems to be correcting for social wrongs, historical social wrongs. But as it goes on, it can have the chain reaction of creating more injustices and inequalities, right? because you are actually creating more biases, right, by giving more advantage to the so-called worst off, right? Okay, so these are the social issues, the social problems. What about AI? So the problem with AI is that in this chapter, right, the author gave examples, right? Things that have already happened, right? So AI that makes prediction with human biases, right? And such biases occur, right? As I said, they are human in nature. Human beings are the people who generated the data, right, in its raw form, and fed it to the computational models that generate the outputs, right, the predictions. So if you're kind of predicting people with certain attributes, right, the model will just compute that based on the inputs, right? And the inputs are just from the human beings, right, you and I. So this brought up the question, okay, if we were to clean the data or to clean the outputs, right, which one is better? Is it better to clean the input data, or is it better to clean the outputs, right, the outcomes? Right now, the approach that's been taken by ChatGPT is like moderating the outputs, right? Doing a post hoc processing of the text that can be generated. So all kinds of negative contents were, automatically they will be cleaned, right? So if you ask ChatGPT to generate something pornographic in nature, right, pornographic text, ChatGPT will not do it, right? Okay, even though, right, it can have such text as the input, but it will not give you the output, right? And now, but still, right, it produces biases according to a latest study by a group of Stanford researchers, right? There are biases, right, showing that ChatGPT has stereotypical views of people of color, right? Specifically African Americans, right? It kind of like predict them as less susceptible to certain diseases, quicker recovery, right? As compared to white people, right? All these things, all these so-called facts that are generated by ChatGPT at the moment are simply wrong, right? Both the free version and ChatGPT 4.0, the paid version, right? So all of you who are interested, you guys can look up such articles, right? However, such articles do not answer the question, right? So is OpenAI's ChatGPT inherently flawed, right? Since it has such biases. Does such biases make, us, does it really transform it into something that is flawed, that is erroneous, right? And the simple answer is no, right? But I would say that, such models contain imperfections. Imperfection would be the better word to use, right? Much more neutral sounding and much more academic, right? However, you have to know that such imperfections are derived from the inputs, from all the data that has been used to train a model, right? So when it comes to ChatGPT, we use something called reinforcement learning through human feedback, RLHF. And there is human AI collaboration involved, right? I will not elaborate on this. I will leave all of you to Google this thing, RLHF, right? ChatGPT, you guys will see a lot of news articles, a lot of, readings on this, right? So, but, at the crux of it, right? When it comes to the foundational layers, it is really the data, right? That created all these so-called, biased outcomes, biased outputs, right? If we were to tweak the data in a way, as suggested by the author, right? In a way that actually got rid of all these biases in the first place, then in the data, you will not see such biased, contents, right? So, but, you have to ask yourself, is this the correct solution, right? And then this really ties in with what I talked, at the start about the difference principle, about positive discrimination, right? In other words, you were trying to do something that corrects for past wrongs, right? You think you are being a good Samaritan, okay? You think you're being like Jesus, a good person. But then again, by tinkering, by interfering, you can introduce another layer or layers of biases, right? That actually confuses things, that makes interpretation even more difficult, right? So if you tinker with the data, with the raw data, right, the outcome can be perfect, right? It can reflect a lot of equal opportunities, greater justice, more advantages for the worse off. But then again, who are you fooling, right? I mean, that would just be, a reflection of you correcting the raw data, injecting your own personal biases of what an ideal society should be like, right? And so this really creates a lot of philosophical dilemmas, right? A lot of questions about what should we do, So should we just accept the AI model for what it is? All right? Should we just do like a post-hoc processing, like what OpenAI is doing right now? Should we correct the raw data? Think of the raw data in which you can see from my voice, hear from my voice that it is not really recommended. Or alternatively, should we embark on methods, new ways to improve our societies and political frameworks? Personally, I would suggest the last approach, right? And that is also the opinion of the author, all right? So he is recommending that to all readers, that we need to start thinking about this. The first is that we need to have this consciousness, this awareness, before we take any concrete action. We cannot put the cart before the horse, all right? We cannot just take action blindly without thinking things through. And we also shouldn't put our faith, right? Believe that all these technological corporations, all the governments in the world, all these political parties will automatically make things for the better, right? They will create more legislation. There will be more rules, regulation, regulating the development of AI. But such rules, how it actually translates, how it actually ties in, right, with improving social welfare, our present human condition, human consciousness, human cognition. This is not the responsibility of politicians, right? This is the responsibility of individuals, right? People like ourselves, right? And to start this movement, we have people like Mark Zuckerberg, right, our Professor Zuckerberg, right, and many like-minded individuals, philosophers, right. All these things you may think that, this is just some humanity artsy project. There is no technical, technological implication. If you think in this way, you are wrong, right? Because it is human ideas, right, that shape the development of technologies, never the reverse, right? So if we can develop technologies, we can mold them, we can shape them, we can change them, right? If we stop thinking, all these technologies will start to take over our lives, right? Imagine in a world if you have, a supercomputer that accomplished AGI, artificial general intelligence. So it's able to have the same thoughts, even emotions as us. And it is many, many times 100-fold smarter, stronger than the average human being. If that happened, then you have to take a good look at yourself. Are human beings actually needed on this planet? right? We will not be able to compete, right? Even though we are the masters, all right? But the servants that we created will start to take over because we don't have the ability to control them, right? So before that actually happens, it is time to contemplate. It is time to think. It is time to ponder, right? And this book actually gives us the impetus, injected us into the consciousness of our mind, of our psyche, about, the pertinence, the vitality of doing something like this, right? And that is really to think about AI, about its relation to politics, to society, to economics, right? So I would really encourage everybody who listened to me until here, right, to go and look up this book, right? It can be found in our community libraries here in Singapore. You can also buy it online from Amazon.com and other websites, right? It's not expensive. I highly recommend people to read this book in your free time. You will become a much better person, more educated, more savvy about all these AI technologies that we use, right? And with that, I conclude this clip, right? And I wish everybody a good week ahead.